The moment has arrived that we've all been waiting for, our favorite and most exciting part of the show, and that is a moment in African history. All right, so 5 daring escapes by some very brave enslaved people during American slavery. Let's do it. Let's go back in time. Let's rewind. Sarah, I'm going to need you to create a rewind button for me. So when I say let's go back in time, we go zzz, and we hear that. All right, let's go back in time. So from the very beginning of slavery in America, enslaved people yearned to escape from their owners and flee to safety. This yearning has been described as an irrepressible desire for freedom, which no danger or power could restrain. No hardship could deter. The danger and difficulty in escaping from slavery are very hard to imagine. Most slaves were illiterate and had no money and few, if any, possessions. And the color of their skin made them easy targets during the daylight for those who would hunt them down, often with the help of bloodhounds, and return them to their owners. Many runaways had long distances to travel on foot before they were able to reach safety in a free state or in Canada. Not surprisingly, the vast majority of slaves who escaped from bondage were captured and returned. Most of those who were returned to their owners were severely punished in an effort to deter others from attempting to leave. But despite the dangers, however, many runaways managed to find their way north into states that had outlawed slavery. And the following 5 people risked it all to escape to freedom in some daring and ingenious ways. Number 1, Robert Smalls. That's a ship. So at just 23 years old, Smalls captured a ship in Charleston Harbor and sailed himself and a small group to freedom. Born a slave in Beaufort, South Carolina, Smalls was hired as a rigger in Charleston and eventually a sailor, which led to a job as a deckhand on a Confederate supply ship during the war. And the ship was called the Planter and was carrying supplies between the forts in Charleston Harbor. Smalls learned how to navigate the Planter, and the pre-dawn hours of May 13, 1862, in the middle of the Civil War, he and a crew of 8 men, along with 5 women and 3 children, including Smalls' wife and 2 children, quietly slipped the Planter out of Charleston Harbor as white officers and crew slept in town. Smalls expertly navigated the ship through 5 Confederate checkpoints, offering the correct signal to pass each as it went towards the Union blockade. And it was daring and it was dangerous, and if caught, the crew were prepared to blow up the vessel. That was their plan. But Smalls was strategic. When he reached the Union blockade, he quickly changed the Confederate flag and raised a white bed sheet, signaling surrender. Praising the North for his courage, Smalls later helped recruit African Americans to serve in the Union Army and would end up as one of the first Black Americans to serve in the United States Congress. He stole a ship and he navigated it to freedom. I mean, who does that? He's a slave. He did that. And he saved his wife and children as well. All right, moving on. Robert Henry Box Brown. So, determined to escape the oppression of slavery, African-American slave Brown made one of the most innovative and daring escapes in history when he decided to ship himself to freedom in a wooden box. His plan was to have himself shipped as a cargo from Virginia to Philadelphia, where slavery had been abolished. So he contacted a carpenter to construct a box which had 3 small holes to help him breathe. And on March 23, 1849, Brown began that dangerous journey. He climbed into the box, carrying with him some water and a few crackers. It was labeled dry goods, and his carpenter friend wrote on it, "This side up," to make sure he was always in the upright position. And after 27 hours, the box arrived at the headquarters of the Philadelphia Anti-Slavery Society, and he was free after the harrowing experience. He shipped himself to freedom. Who does that? Henry Box Brown does that. Okay, moving on. Ellen and William Craft, you know this one. You guys know we've done this story on the show before. So she was a light-skinned slave, and he was a dark-skinned. Her husband was a dark-skinned slave. So she disguised herself as a white male, and he was meant to be her slave companion, and they ran away together. They were on the ship. They used Ellen's skin tone as an advantage. They pretended to be white master and her slave aboard a train, and then she also feigned a hand injury to hide the fact that she couldn't read or write, so she didn't have to sign anything. Her hand was in a sling. And then on December 21, 1848, they boarded a steamship and were able to reach Philadelphia. They stayed with some abolitionists before moving to Boston, but due to slave catchers, they eventually went to England, where they lived and raised a family, and they made a living conducting speaking engagements about slavery in the United States. Okay, number 4, Frederick Douglass. Everybody knows Frederick Douglass, right? Yes. He was known by his birth name, Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. He attempted to escape for 2 years before his success. After meeting a free black woman, Anna Murray, and falling for her, they hatched a plan with Murray's help, and he was just 20 years old. On September 3, 1838, this is in the 1830s, by the way, guys, Douglass hopped aboard a rail train headed north disguised as a free black sailor. The ruse was made possible by Douglass's knowledge of the sea. By way of working on the Baltimore waterfront, he was able to obtain sailor's papers from a free man as part of his ruse and don an outfit befitting of a sailor. By miracle and fate, the white train conductor did not discover Douglass's impersonation, and he rode the train through slave states of Maryland and Delaware, still not outside the confines of danger and doubt. But when he reached the town of Havre-de-Grace in Maryland, which at the time was near Pennsylvania, he crossed the river by ferry, and the stressful journey was finally ended, and reached a safe house in New York of abolitionist David Ruggles, and he was free. And he went on to become the Frederick Douglass, and we know all about him. And if you don't know about him, find out or wait for me to do a story on him in the future. And finally, number 5, we have Anna Maria Weems. And she's remembered as a woman who escaped slavery around the White House by dressing as a man. She was born into slavery in 1840 in Maryland, but her escape was very, very risky. So J. Bigelow, a lawyer from Washington, D.C., who had earlier helped her family purchase their freedom, came up with the idea to help her escape to freedom. On September 23, 1855, she was 15 years old, and she escaped the home of her slave owners and made her way to Bigelow's house, one of the safe houses used as hiding places along the lines in the Underground Railroad. But due to a $500 reward, which at the time might as well have been $5 million, for anyone who could bring her back, Bigelow hatched another plan. She was to dress up as a boy named Joe Wright in a driver's uniform, including a jacket, bow tie, pants, and a cap. And late November, when her escape was no longer in the headlines, the Bigelow family doctor drove his carriage and parked it in front of the house at the side of the White House. And as part of the plan, he climbed into the passenger seat and waited for Joe Wright, the driver, to arrive, who was escorted by Bigelow. The plan was to make people believe that Dr. Harvey had just completed some work in the White House and was now being driven home by his coachman. So Weems, remember she was 15 years old, dressed as Joe Wright, successfully drove the carriage out of Washington and began her journey to freedom. That's it, guys.